Hi everybody and welcome back to my videos, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening or on Rumble, whichever one you happen to be doing. So anyways, welcome back to my channel, or I think they call it a channel on Rumble also, Healing Through Christ. So, anyways, yesterday I started a video series, if you want to call it that, a multi-part series, if you want to call it that, about the paranormal, about the biblical view of the paranormal. Okay, and there is so much to go over, so much proof that it's going to take a few parts to go over everything. Okay, and a lot of it's going to be from I'm going to use a lot of scripture, and it's also going to be a lot of information you can deduce by what the Bible doesn't say or what the Bible tells us. You can also find stories after stories of people's encounters with the paranormal. Okay? So, anyways, let's get into this. So, I'm gonna go into more detail into ghost, quote unquote, what ghosts really are. Okay? And I suppose right now I can give I think I already mentioned it in my last video series, my last series about spiritual warfare, where I dealt with the unseen stuff. You know, the signs of spiritual attack, which a lot of it is unseen. Most spiritual activity is unseen. Okay, so I believe that there are more people who experience those spiritual attacks that I mentioned than there are people who experience paranormal activity. Okay, especially the first three on that list. And if I think about it, I might make a list and put it in the description or something. I don't know. Okay, but right now, let's see. I think I will go in more detail about the paranormal side. I talked about how Ephesians 6:12 only deals with the unseen stuff. It does not deal with paranormal activity. Okay? It deals with Ephesians 6:12 deals with a lot of unseen stuff, which when I initially made my scripture list years ago, to have this on the ready, because I never know when I'm gonna talk about this, or just I thought it'd be good to have the scripture at hand. That was before I got that revelation about Ephesians 6:12. So yeah. Now I guess it technically could apply, but the immediate context is about spiritual warfare, the unseen stuff. Okay? Which I go over a lot in detail in my other video about spiritual warfare. Okay? There's spiritual attacks. Okay? So, anyways, I believe I might have mentioned somewhere in that series the three different types of hauntings, with the third being a mixture of the first two. Okay? The first type of haunting, okay, as I'm going to call them, is a familiar spirit haunting. That's when the haunting, okay, that's when there is a familiar spirit impersonating a ghost. Okay? Possibly a ghost of somebody who actually lived and or died on that property. Okay? Familiar spirit hauntings are usually, in fact, are always the site of a tragedy. They are always the site of tragedy, or they have some association with a tragedy. Okay? Where especially ones where someone died, or multiple people have died. Okay? So that's the first type of haunting. The second type of haunting is openly demonic. That's when the demon is not hiding who and what they are. And usually the people who experience them don't know what to do about them. And yeah, that lack of knowledge, oh boy, the demon takes advantage of that. Okay, so openly demonic haunting are usually the side of occult activity, and or have some association or connection to occult activity. You know, playing around with witchcraft, playing around with Ouija boards, and maybe some of them, a lot of these paranormal games and challenges. Okay? Maybe some of those games are safe, but I don't know which ones are not. And it's best to leave them all alone just to be on the safe side. Okay, Ouija boards, you kind of, and maybe all of these occult activities, occult practices, they're all kind of a roll of the dice. Sometimes you may experience something immediately. Sometimes you might not experience anything at all. Sometimes you don't experience anything in that moment, but something attaches itself to you and lays dormant for years and years before randomly awakening. Yeah, I've heard about that. Okay? And then the third type of haunting is a mixture of the two. Usually the side of a tragedy and occult practices. Like most likely in those kind of situations, they might have originally started off as a familiar spirit haunting, but then somebody decided to get a Ouija board to communicate with their spirit, and ended up opening a doorway to openly demonic. That is my theory on how a lot of those mixture hauntings happened. Okay? And also, I have a theory that, and it is based on scripture, because we know that the devil is behind everything that happened to Job. I'm not going to go over that again. Okay, when I go over that, the book of Job, I go over Job's story in a separate video. But we know that the devil is behind all that. So we know that demonic spirits can cause tragedies. And, familiar spirit hauntings are the site of tragedies, or have some association with a tragedy. So it kind of makes me wonder, if those tragedies were of demonic influence, if there was a demonic spirit behind those tragedies. Just something to kind of think about. Okay? Because the book of Job tells us that the devil, demonic spirits can cause tragedies. Okay? So, yeah. Now then, let's really get into this. Okay? Let's really get into it, because I have so much stuff I want to go over. I'm going to have the biblical proof in the description of this video. I don't know if I'm going to have time to go over everything, or if I'm going to have to split this up into 2 parts. Okay? So, we're going to focus on scripture that's about ghost, supposedly. in Scripture that's about familiar spirits in general. And we know that what familiar spirits actually are. Okay? So, using Scripture, using biblical proof, I can show you that familiar spirits are behind ghosts and psychic abilities like fortune telling and mediums. Okay? So yeah. Using Scripture. Okay? Now then, based on that, and the fact that they are called familiar spirits, and plus, combined with, okay, in openly demonic hauntings, some people have reported, like, the demons sometimes will manifest in the image of another person who lives there. Okay? And you might see that person who wasn't there. Maybe it's like the real ones, like they're out in town somewhere, or like they're gone for some reason. You might see them walking by. You might have a conversation with them, or so you think. Sometimes you might like see them from the back while having a conversation with them. But then 10 minutes later, the real one comes in and you are confused, like, I thought I was just talking to you. So yeah, I've heard all kinds of cases like that. And openly demonic cases and openly demonic hauntings. I've heard about cases where the demon even impersonates the voice. Not just the image, but the voice of one of the residents. Or somebody that the residents know, like someone who was there. Okay? So, again, familiar spirits. So, based on that right there, it is safe to assume that mimics and skinwalkers are also demonic, possibly even familiar spirits. Possibly. Because you hear similar activity in openly demonic haunting. People dealing with the same kind of stuff. Okay? So, now, there is no scripture that talks about quote-unquote skinwalkers and mimics, like directly, but we can deduce from what the Bible tells us. Okay? With what information that we already have, we know that there are no ghosts. Okay? I mentioned at the end of my last video. So, time to get into some scripture. Okay? I think I'll go over the ghost one first. Okay, so, just in case I don't get a chance to go over all the scriptures in this video. Okay, for the ghost, they are 1 Samuel chapter 28 verses 7 through 15, Leviticus 19:31, Leviticus 20 verse 6, and Leviticus 20 verse 27. Let's see, hold on a second, what was I doing with Matthew 14? Let's see, Matthew 14. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, Matthew 14. So Matthew 14. Uh, when they saw Jesus walking on the water. When they saw Jesus walking on the water. Okay, so keep in mind, I'm trying to debunk the idea of ghosts by going over these scriptures and explain what they really mean. Okay. Okay, so many people will use 1 Samuel 28:7-15 and Matthew 14:26 as biblical proof of ghost, while ignoring the fact that technically in both Hebrew and Greek, ghost and spirit are interchangeable. While they technically do have a different meaning, and like the English words have a different meaning, because when we think of ghost, we think of a human spirit, like someone who used to be alive. At one time, they had a physical, like, they was alive at one time, okay? So they no longer have their physical bodies. That's and we kind of picture them sort of haunting a place, like a haunted house or something. They went over the 3 different types of hauntings. Okay. So, in Hebrew and Greek, ghost and spirit are interchangeable. Okay? Basically, when they saw Jesus walking on the water, they thought Jesus was a spirit. Okay? A demon, spirits can include demons. I mean, the Bible talks about spirits. Okay? After Jesus was resurrected, this is a bonus one. After Jesus was resurrected, I believe he ate and drank with them to prove that he was not a spirit. Okay? So again, this right here is an acknowledgement that spirits exist. Okay? And that includes God, the angels, the Holy Trinity, of course, and even the demonic. Okay? So yeah, I'm trying to debunk the idea of ghosts. So anyways, where was I at? Okay, so now Matthew 17, chapter 17, verses 1-9. That's one of the scriptures that I listed. Let's see. Let me go over what this was about. Oh yeah, when Jesus was having was conversing with Moses and Elijah on the Mount of Transfiguration. I guess that's another verse of scripture where somebody could use to try to see ghost. Okay. Yeah, that is another verse of scripture. However, when we think of the idea of ghost, we get the idea that this spirit is left at the place where they died at, and they're stuck in that place and they're haunting that place. Okay? So, we know that technically Elijah didn't actually die because he ascended into heaven, or he was taken. And we also know that Moses, and we also know that God showed Moses the future. So it's kind of interesting. Like, are these people actually, it's kind of, I guess it could be debatable what's going on in this situation, but nonetheless, these are not technically ghosts, in the sense that they are haunting the place where they died at, especially since Elijah never actually died. Okay? So, and it's also kind of begs the question about what's going on here about necromancy. Like, yeah. Well, hold on a second. I think it is. Let's see. Well, I guess it is revealed that it is a vision. Yeah, Jesus said that was a vision, but nonetheless, Jesus was apparently conversing with Moses and Elijah. So people could potentially use that verse to prove ghost, as biblical proof of ghost. But then, one could also make the argument that, okay, maybe Elijah is technically not dead because he ascended into heaven. But maybe, like Moses, because it might have actually been possible to communicate with the dead before they was empty, when they was in the holding place, before everybody was moved into heaven. I don't know if that's what's going on here, or maybe if maybe when Moses was on the mountain for those 40 days and 40 nights twice, maybe God took him to the future, and this right here is that. It's part of it. Maybe that could be it. I don't know. But nonetheless, neither Moses or Elijah are ghosts. Okay? Because they are not haunting the place where they died at. Their spirits are not stuck there. Okay? Whatever's going on with them, Jesus most likely summoned them. Okay? Yeah, I might look into what's going on with this. About when Jesus summoned Moses and Elijah. I might have to do a deeper study into that. But I know that they are not ghosts. Okay, let's see. Okay, so anyways, 1 Peter 4, 1 through 6, Luke 16, 19 through 24, that's the parable of Lazarus and the rich man. That is one of the big scriptures. And, okay, so I have Luke 23, 43, when Jesus told the thief on the cross that this day you would be in paradise, to kind of bring out that paradise, and in Abraham's bosom in Luke 16, 19 through 24, the parable of Lazarus and the rich man, that is the same place. Okay? Okay, so the story of Lazarus and the rich man debunks the idea of ghost. And keep in mind, that's Lazarus and the rich man, so at this point, it's basically showing what happens to the sinner. The parable of Lazarus and the rich man shows what happens to the sinner. And Abraham's bosom has since been emptied out, sometime between Jesus' crucifixion and resurrection. So it's been emptied out. They are moved to heaven. If it was at one time actually possible to communicate with the dead, especially those who were in the holding place, Abraham's bosom. It is no longer possible now. Okay? So, 2 Corinthians 5, that's why I put 1 through 5 for a little bit of context, tells us that it talks about, the promise of heaven and being absent from and how to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. So this shows what happened when you die from a believer's perspective if you are a Christian. So again, these scriptures demonstrate that when you die, you do not become a ghost. Okay? Let's see how long this video is. 25 minutes. Wow, I have a... Boy, there was a lot to go over. Alright, let's see. I want to go over some familiar spirits a little bit as well. I want to go over scripture for that. And then I might have to go into more detail about that. But I think I actually did talk about it earlier in this video. Now I'm going to give a little bit of proof. Okay, so Acts chapter 16, verses 16 through 18 is how we know that that soothsaying or like fortune telling is demonic. People who are fortune teller it is demonic. Okay, it is demonic. That right there is how we know. Okay, and there's other scripture as well that goes into detail that shows how we know that. Okay, let's see. Scripture for a familiar spirit that talks about that. Some translation might say medium instead, or something along those lines. See, this is a New King James. Okay, so it's okay. I just mentioned Acts 16, chapter 16, verses 16 to 18. So, 1 Samuel, chapter 28, verses 7 through 15. So, in Ghost, we focused on the ghost part, like on was it Saul being brought up? No, Saul is the one who was. No, Samuel. Yeah, the prophet Samuel is being brought up. Yeah, because so Samuel. Yeah, so Saul wanted to use this medium to summon the recently deceased prophet Samuel. Okay, so in the Ghost, this same scripture is listed in Ghost, and in that one, it was the idea is to go over whether or not that was actually Samuel, because that's been debated. Okay, but here we're gonna focus on, let's say scripture is used, and this time it's focusing on like the medium aspect of this story, like the woman and her, like she's a soothsaying, she's a medium basically. So yeah. Okay, so, and as I mentioned, familiar spirits are behind Ghost and psychic abilities, like soothsaying, fortune telling, and all that. And they are also behind past life memories. Okay? Okay, so all the scriptures against mediums. Okay, so and some of them also say familiar spirits. So familiar spirits. Okay, so I think I got up to Samuel. So now let's go to Leviticus 19:31. Let's see. I think last time I could get focus on the familiar spirit because I want I have that scripture used in Ghost to point out how ghosts are actually familiar spirits, and now I'm using here to point out that ghost. I mean that familiar spirits are also behind fortune telling and soothsaying, whatever you want to call that. So yeah, because when you look up the Hebrew word here, it can actually refer to a ghost. And I'm going to put that in the description, okay? When you look up the Hebrew word that's translated familiar spirit, what the definition is ghost. Okay, so. And then one of the other definition of a word that's used there is, it can also mean soothsayer, and which then connects it to the New Testament, to Acts chapter 16. So yeah, so anyways, Leviticus 20 verse 6 and Leviticus 20 verse 27, and once again 2 Corinthians chapter 5 verses 1 through 5. So the primary focus is verse 5 that talks about not to be absent from the Lord is to be present with. Not to be absent from your body is to be present with the Lord. So shows what happens to Christians when we die. So again, when you get the idea of that familiar spirits are behind, familiar spirits are also behind ghosts and like fortune telling abilities, and or mediums. Okay, and so psychic abilities, and they are also behind past life memories. Okay, to create the idea of reincarnation. And they might even be behind mimics and skinwalkers. Okay? So, let's see how long this video is so far. 32 minutes. Wow. Okay, I need to wrap things up. Let's double check that I'm done. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and end it right here. And maybe tomorrow I'll go into, I might go a little bit deep into familiar spirits if I left out anything. And if not, well, in the next video we'll continue with another topic, okay? Maybe in more details and other stuff that I briefly mentioned in part 1, okay? Well, this is it for part 1. And by the way, at the end of this series, I'm going to show you how to, I'm going to advise you what to do about it, okay? If I don't do it in the comment section or something first. Well, anyways, that is it for this video. Bye.